Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for registering and joining. I can see the participant number is raising, so a lot of people are joining this webinar. We'll wait maybe 1 minute before we officially start the webinar. Yeah. Thank you. All right, the number is still going up. So it looks like there are still more people joining the webinar. Maybe let's wait 30 more seconds and then we start. Okay, people are still joining in, but in the interest of time, we will start this webinar. So welcome everyone to today's very exciting webinar, one of the very hot topics in the African market, energy curtailment. And but is it an Africa's power problem or CNI Solar's big opportunity is what we are going to discuss in this webinar. Yeah. Some quick house rules before we kick in. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you will see a tab that says Q&A. So please post your questions there. At the end of the webinar, we have allocated 10 to 15 minutes to answer all the questions that you have. And for the questions that we won't be able to answer, given the time constraint, we will prepare their reply and send out to all the attendees via email. Yeah, within a couple of days. Also, technology can be funny at times. So if your webinar gets stuck or if there's any problem with Zoom, just refresh your browser or just log back into Zoom. And last but not the least, if you find this webinar interesting, if you are interested in predictive analytics for your solar and BESS systems, you can reach out to us. You can schedule a demo with us. A link to scheduling the demo would be in the chat box. Yeah. All right. So a quick introduction of who you're going to interact with today. I'll do a brief introduction of myself. I'm the co-founder and the chief operating officer at SmartHelio. I lead the customer success team within the company, and I have a little over a decade of experience in optimizing, maximizing the performance of solar PV assets in the US. And we have one of the prominent figures from the African market, the Chief Technical Officer of Daystar, Tayo. Welcome, Tayo, to the webinar. Tayo leads the solar and storage strategy at Daystar for the African market. And he has more than 10 years of experience in delivering large-scale projects and advancing clean energy in Africa. So Tayo, we are more than delighted to have you in this webinar as a co-host and a thought leader.
Thanks, Shankaransh. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Tayo. All right. So before we start, let's lighten up the mood a little bit. So every solar company has a performance engineer, and their role is to make sure that the systems are performing at its best. Yeah. So there is a performance engineer here in this picture, and at noon, he's doing his job the best. He has survived all the big faults that can happen, but then comes the monster, then comes the grid curtailment or energy curtailment, and that kind of destroys the entire purpose of a performance engineer. Yeah. And that's the monster energy curtailment that we are going to discuss through this webinar. Let's begin with understanding our audience. Very soon you will see a poll on your screen, and you just need to identify who you are so that we understand what are the different kind of audience that we have today. So yeah, if you are a senior management or a founder working in asset management, innovation manager, so on and so forth, please select what's applicable best to you, and we'll see the results in a bit. We will wait maybe 30-40 seconds, and then we'll close this poll. So by the time this poll, I think the poll is done. Okay, we have a fair split. We have 21% senior management and founders. I'm sure this topic, especially coming from Tayo, would be very interesting to you. Asset management, well, we all care about maximizing energy. We have some performance analysts, some plant engineers, and 32% others. That's really good to know, and we really hope that from this webinar you have certain takeaways for your business. Yeah, so thank you for sending in your poll. Briefly, today's agenda, will very quickly see who SmartHelio is. Tayo will help us take through the Daystar journey from a startup to a giant company that Daystar is right now. And of course, we'll address the monster, the elephant in the room, energy curtailment. We will understand what energy curtailment is and what we can do about it. We will know from Tayo what Daystar is doing about energy curtailment. We'll also very briefly look at how technology like ours, empowered by AI and smart technology, can really help you identify and quantify grid curtailment. Yeah. All right. So SmartHelio, we are a software company and we provide advanced data analytics solution to solar and BESS owners. We use data to diagnose and predict faults in the solar PV and BESS systems. We are a global company with our clientele spreading across 3 continents. We have clients like Daystar, Verbund, Tata, who we work with now for the 6 years that we have been in business. And as a company, the core value that we deliver is maximizing the performance and the life of your solar PV and BESS assets. So we go long back. The backbone of our company is our R&D effort that we have put for more than 12 years now. And we have worked with leading European institutes. And through these research projects, we found a gold mine. We found some labeled data. Now, what's labeled data? While working in multiple countries, we got data, electrical time series data, where we knew that at what time, what problem occurred in a solar PV or a BESS system. And we leveraged this labeled data to convert or to create physics-based algorithms that can detect the unique signature of each fault. And that's how we started diagnosing, classifying, and predicting faults. Yeah. Our software is Autopilot. It connects with your data directly or internet, so there's no need to install any additional hardware for you to use Autopilot. Whether you have an inverter-based monitoring system or a third-party monitoring system or a SCADA system, you name it, we can collect data from any of these systems without any hardware. And we also provide fully integrated smart ticketing and reporting system so that you can track all the work that you need to do to fix your solar PV asset, and also reports where you can track your monthly or weekly KPIs. All right, so quiz time. Let us know that how energy curtailment is affecting you and what are you doing about it currently? Yeah. So it's a two-part question. So let us know how it affects you and currently what are you doing about it? We'll wait a few more seconds for everyone to answer this. Tayo, wild guess. What do you think most people are doing about it right now?
Yeah, I think most people would be installing BESS at customer sites, or at least in the process of designing BESS systems at the customer sites.
Let's see. Let's see. I'm also curious. Still have a couple of votes coming in. And I guess the least vote would come to it doesn't affect me yet. All right. Guys, is the voting over? Can we check the results, please? Oh, well, I was wrong. So there is 19% audience. It doesn't affect them yet. But 67% it's affecting them significantly. And Tayo, you were bang on. So people are installing BESS. So that's already a very, very good news. There's still quite a few genset users, and I think it's a manual activity to ask the client to turn off the genset. I also see that people are getting smarter in how they are arranging their PPA agreements. 19% they have designed their PPA in a way that they get the minimum revenue from the customer. That's good. Good 15% have advised their customer to shift loads to solar hours. That's fantastic. That's the bare minimum one would do. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for helping us understand your journey. So, Tayo, help us understand the journey of Daystar from how you guys started to where you guys are now as a company. Over to you.
Sure, and thanks, Shankaransh. So at Daystar, we provide hybrid power solutions for industrial clients largely, right? We started off with the smaller sites, so bank branches, commercial sites, and have scaled up over the years to large megawatt scale power plants. And that includes solar batteries and sometimes other power assets, right? Our offerings are split into two business models. We have the SaaS and the PaaS. So SaaS for solar as a service, PaaS for power as a service. And the key difference between them is in it's providing power as a whole, right? So for PaaS, we're a one-stop shop for power solutions for the client, which means We take care of the grid bills, we take care of diesel supply, we take care of the gensets, but also the solar systems. Whereas for SaaS, it's largely solar alone under typically a PPA model. So in terms of the structure, it could be at Daystar, we prefer PPAs or lease to own. So we own the assets, we install, operate, and maintain the systems over a long-term contract. But we also sell some of the systems outright. Our offerings are based on 5 key pillars, right? Offering cost savings from day one, right, to our clients. And we do that by, of course, financing the assets and owning those assets such that in month one, the client already sees a 10 to 20, even up to 30% savings on their energy bills. We also offer carbon reduction. We're able to estimate how much carbon dioxide savings, CO2 savings, you gain from the installation of our solar systems. As I said earlier, no capital expenditure for our clients. We are very reliable and have integrated automatic monitoring systems in our solar systems installed and power systems in general, right? So from anywhere in the world, from the screen of your phone or laptop, you are able to see exactly what your plant is doing, right? Production from your existing assets, consumption from your load, and also production from the renewable energy sources. We have over 125 megawatts capacity installed thus far. We're present in 7 countries in Africa and over 400 sites across the group.
I can only imagine that demands a massive operation as well.
Indeed. So from a staff perspective, we have more than 250 qualified staff, and that takes us to the next slide, right? So it's a full chain that we operate in at Daystar. So we design, install the systems, like I said, operate the plant over a long-term contract. We are fully owned by Shell as of 2022. So Daystar Power operates as part of the Shell group. We have a lot of the leading organizations in the countries where we operate, as you can see from the screen, right? So we have large-scale systems for industrial clients and most of the leaders in the FMCG industry.
Perfect. No, that's good. How has been the shift from pre-shell era to now? What has changed?
So it's helped us in so many ways. We've improved safety culture within Daystar, but largely also pre-shell, we had to do lots of financing rounds year on year. But this has given us a base to grow exponentially as Daystar.
I can imagine. Well, congratulations. That's a big feat to be a shell company now.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So talking about the elephant in the room, energy curtailment. Since you are in the midst of it, serving African market, just briefly help our audience explain what does energy curtailment mean?
Indeed, and that's why we're here today. So it's energy curtailment, briefly put, is the restriction of electricity. I think our focus here is renewable energy, so often from renewable energy, when the existing power source or power supply or demand cannot undo the full output, right? Sometimes it is intentionally triggered by C&I operators. Most times it's a restriction from grid, gensets, or demand. And it's typically done to maintain stability, right? So from a grid perspective, you're injecting too much, there's congestion on the grid, and then there's a direct communication from the grid operator to say, oh, we need curtailment on this solar, right? From a genset part, it's acknowledging the base load of the genset, which is the minimum required load on the genset for the genset to operate efficiently. And then from the load side, it could be economic impact on the operations of the plant. but we'll go into all of that in detail. On the chart on the left, you see what curtailment looks like on a graph, right? So we have the solar curve. It's a perfect bell curve on this day. And this is actual data, right? So it's the orange curve that's perfectly bell, right? That's the irradiance. And that's how much sunlight there is on that day. But you also find that the yellow curve or the yellow line does not follow the radiance perfectly, right? Which is because there's curtailment. So we're seeing the solar line following the load perfectly. And then the genset, which is the purple line, being flat, right? So the load is the green one. Solar during the day follows the load. The genset line is flat. So the control system installed at this site has acknowledged the size of the genset, about 1.5 megawatts, with a base load of about 45%, right? Which means at every point in time, there must be about 670 or 700 kilowatts on that genset for the genset to operate efficiently. And that's what's causing curtailment at this site. So curtailment on an historical chart can be viewed as loss of correlation between the curve, solar curve, and the radiance curve, where radiance sensors are installed.
That's very well explained. Thank you, Tayo. I think this also sets the base tone for this webinar. Like you said, sometimes the grid can restrict the energy from solar or the genset, or maybe just the load is not enough, right?
Indeed.
That brings us to having a very quick overview of the African market. So we see here in the chart on the left, there are multiple countries where the grid access in Africa is very restricted, right? One of the things is if you only have solar installed and the grid goes out, the solar stops functioning, right? And you lose energy. Most of the systems that we see in Africa are behind the meter systems to take care of the load or the demand of a particular commercial building. And there, if the grid goes out, like you said, the generator has to produce a minimum amount, and that also leads to the curtailment, right? Now, which means that unavailability of grid or the availability of diesel generators at the site is kind of a vicious circle for energy curtailment, and it has some cost implications. Yeah, the per unit cost of producing electricity from diesel generators is sometimes 3 times high as if you are only producing it from solar. But even though there is a cost implication, there is still diesel generators in the energy mix, and that's because of the reliability that it provides, right? I can keep fueling diesel in my gensets, and it will keep giving me the load that I need. But maybe in this webinar, we'll also touch base with what are the other alternatives where we can get a similar power reliability, and I can already sense that the audience, most of them voted for best system, so they already know the kind of shift that needs to be made. But we'll also learn about this shift within Daystar, and how the customers are reacting to it, and how Daystar is going about this entire shift, a power reliability not from diesel generators but using solar and BESS. Yeah. Okay, so you said, Tayo, that Daystar owns and operates. You put in your money, your investors' money into these systems, you own these systems, and you manage them, right? Help us understand that when curtailment happens, how does it hurt Daystar?
Thank you, Shankaransh. Yeah, so I think the biggest one is the cost impact, right? So where we own the gensets, for example, and we're curtailed, say, based on load demand, we see increased diesel or gas cost, so increased fuel cost. And this is because with curtailment, it means the gensets are running at their base load, right? And multiple gensets are running. And that's just purely diesel cost in terms of fuel, but also from a maintenance perspective, they're running more. Um, of course, the assets are also depreciating. So we see increased cost in general. We also see washed investment. So the panels produce, particularly if curtailment occurs for prolonged periods, right? So the panels have the capability to produce more power, but cannot because of curtailment, right? So sun is really high. We have maybe 950 watts per square meter, and production is really low, barely anything, as we saw also from that graph. There's also stranded capacity, which means the systems that are sized for the peak demand of the client is sufficiently underutilized, and all of that translates commercially to reduce return on investment. You're unable to attain the projected profitability based on the IRR. You have most likely increased payback period, and we'll see all of that on the next slide. And lastly, it makes for blocked growth or slightly stringent growth, right, of the company, because you cannot scale solar to its full potential. When you have curtailment, there's no point expanding. But where you have storage, there's ability to expand even beyond what is required, because you have storage and can be used to extend the the time of operation of solar, in a sense.
That's interesting. So maybe over the next few slides, you can help us understand how Daystar is helping tackle this curtailment problem.
Sure. So across the African countries where we operate, right, we find a common theme. I would say across 50% of the countries where we operate, grid is unstable, right? In some of the countries where we operate, it's intermittent to an extent, maybe not as bad as Nigeria, for example. But we see intermittent grid across most of the countries where we operate. And that means clients have to use either diesel or gas gensets, right, as an alternative that provides more stability. And that's one of the challenge, because that introduces some base load, which reduces solar penetration. Another challenge is demand dips. I think a lot of us would expect that with industries, the loads are fairly stable, but that's not the case, right? So in some industries, we see varying loads during weekend because there's low operation. In some industries, because of the product, so the raw material availability, 6 months in a year, raw material is available, so there's production. 6 months, the other 6 months in the year, there's nothing, right? Or because of economy and demand for the product, there's also variation in operation. And then for the grid, we already covered that there's export limits on grid where net metering is applicable. We have sometimes suboptimal genset pairing, right? So in the middle of a contract, a client could decide to replace some gensets and then start pairing them in a way that increases curtailment. And if minimum offtake is not included in the contract, then that impacts also your bottom line.
Yeah.
Cover the impacts. It's lost revenue. It's reduced return on investment, because you're not getting the solar out. It's a PPA. Your production is tied to your revenue. You have higher levelized cost of energy, which is a metric used for bankability of the project, right? It's essentially the average average costs over, that's considering the full cost of the system, capex, O&M over the life of and the total energy to produce over the life of the system. And again, investor confidence, because these are heavy capex investment and require consistent financing. Our response at Daystar has been largely two-pronged, right? So we have solar plus storage, so including storage system designs in new system designs, but also for existing clients, going back to optimize the design to include storage. With storage, you have redundancy, you have reliability. Depending on the capacity of the storage, you can also reduce the number of gensets running, right? So that provides both reliability and stability, but also helps to optimize solar production. On the demand side, there's possibility for smart demand management, which is where you move operational load to daytime hours where possible, or engagement with the client on number of gensets to run, right? So a client may have 4 gensets of different sizes, but are running the 2 largest gensets, which really isn't necessary when smaller gensets can be run that carry the full capacity of the load. So it's that client engagement, advising them on correct genset pairing that would help increase solar penetration. And lastly, I think as C&I companies in the respective countries where we operate, we're able to pull together to help push some policies to the government with respect to net metering or export as it relates to that, but also personally also include offtake in PPA agreements.
Yeah, I think net metering, the larger adoption and a policy to allow net metering at a larger scale is definitely going to help a lot, with curtailment.
So indeed, we're seeing that. I know in Ghana a few years back, net metering was in effect. It was stopped, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, but we're seeing that willingness again from ECG to, put that again in effect, to allow solar also to feed into the grid. I know in some parts, also regions in South Africa, there's partial adoption of net metering in some municipalities. But yeah, it's taking more ground in a number of African countries where we operate.
Oh, that's good to hear. All right, I know we have a lot to talk about. We are a little time constrained, so I think this one, Tayo, you have almost covered that. What's your approach? But maybe your 2 cents on this slide. Tayo, you're on mute. You're on mute.
So to summarize, curtailment, really impacts the bottom line, right? So higher LCOE, higher lower revenues, so lower return on investment. Approach suggested is deployment of BESS, which based on the analysis we will see in coming slides, SmartHelio can also help with, and then educating clients on optimal utilization of existing assets and load shifting and smart demand management. And all of this would help, increase solar use, provide the cost savings, and then also, just to ensure that it happens, that if it happens, you're covered, right? So you also need the minimum offtake clauses in PPAs.
Perfect. All right. So we'll take a break from this topic for next 1 minute. We have a very interesting quiz called Guess the Pattern. So since everything that we do is based on physics, let's say we want to test the knowledge of physics here. I would explain this graph here. What you're seeing here is the DC current and DC voltage coming from two inverters. One inverter that's functioning okay. The other inverter, the current kind of like starts dropping, and its voltage kind of increases. The other inverter, the voltage remains normal, right? So just looking at this pattern of current and voltage, you need to guess what the issue could be. So maybe if you could have the options up. So is it grid curtailment? Is it shading? Is it the power limitation on the inverters, or the inverter just tripped? And of course, both the inverters are from the same site. And just so you know that when we were talking about label data and what we do, these are the kind of information that label data gave us, that when the current and voltage behaved this way, what the issue was. And that's what we were able to convert into algorithms. And now when your data feeds into our autopilot software in real time, and if this pattern is detected, immediately our system would say what issue it is. That's how our system works. Maybe if we can have the results. Grid curtailment is a top one. So unfortunately, it's not grid curtailment, because if it were grid curtailment or energy curtailment, both the inverter's power would have been curtailed. But here, what's happening is this is actually an issue of power limitation. Yeah. What happens here is the internal temperature, the fan of this inverter, it had stopped functioning. So the internal temperature of the inverter was rising to almost its derating temperature, which was 60 degrees Celsius. And whenever it approaches that limit, the inverter starts to limit its power to limit the heat that's being accumulated inside. But if that limit is breached, the inverter will turn itself off, and then it starts back again. Yeah. So that's a classic inverter heating problem. In extreme cases, when it reaches the derate temperature, its power gets limited, and eventually the inverter trips. Yeah. I think that gives a fair idea of how we do what we do. So like Tayo was talking about SmartHelio's role here. Our role is to help you identify when and how much the grid curtailment is happening. So the classic signature of grid curtailment, to put it very simply, is power of all the inverters on a particular circuit. The power will go down simultaneously on all the inverters. And what would happen, that inverter is equipped with MPPTs, the maximum power point trackers. So it will try to still locate the local maxima. And in doing so, you will see the power curve going down, but the voltage would slightly increase of all those inverters during the time of grid curtailment. Yeah. So when the software sees that signature happening, it classifies it as energy curtailment, and it checks, like the plot that Tayo was showing, where the solar or let's say the sun was a bell curve, but then the energy from the solar had flattened out. So it will check the delta between the expected energy and what it is producing now, and that's how it will quantify as grid curtailment. Yeah. I think let's come to the most interesting section that Tayo, you have already touched base upon. I think when it comes to BESS, there's one thing that my professor in Michigan, when I was doing my master's, he told me that, Shankaransh, you can build the best technology possible, but if it's not financially viable, then it's of no use. And a very general notion that we see around BESS, that, oh, it's very costly, to procure and implement. But if you look at the levelized cost of energy that Tayo was talking about, if you only use solar at best with no or very limited diesel, your levelized cost of energy reduces by around 20%. So that means that's the win-win situation for everyone, right? But now here, Tayo, maybe I would like you to shed some light on best implementation, how the reaction of your customers has been, and how Daystar's journey has been with BESS and solar integration in fighting energy curtailment.
Sure. So it's been received very well. So we've last year alone we installed about 12 megawatt hour of BESS systems. So it's the adoption is really, really good, right? I've also included on the screen, you see what it looks like, right? How that has eliminated curtailment at this site, right? So there's a BESS at this site. The broken line is the BESS SOC. It got to 78.3. That's the highest the highest SOC for the day. So you see that there's no curtailment, right? So the way it works is solar goes up to peak. Solar, you can see the solar curve, the yellow curve matches the radiance at
Right,
every point in time, which
right,
means it kept the genset at a flat load for most part of the day, and all excess energy was going into the BESS. And that eliminated curtailment entirely. So it improves solar performance at this site. Before the introduction of BESS, 5 gensets used to be run. So the load on the genset would be 2.5 megawatts. But now we've reduced the number of running gensets to 2. So only 1 megawatt on the genset, while solar and BESS takes the rest of the load. So solar and BESS integrates with the existing network, makes for automation also of the genset. So it was manual run of the genset previously. Now the genset start automatically based on the SOC, based on the availability of solar, and that makes for automatic operation also of the client side.
right. No, thank you, Tayo. It sounds very exciting, and thank you for like sharing this curve from from one of your databases. This actually brings me to a question, which is also happens to be the first question that we have received. And the question is for you, that can you clarify how do you take the decision when best makes financial sense?
So for us, and it's a conversation between Daystar and the client, right? So for us, we compare, and again, for PPA solutions, we have a tariff, right? So we compare what the cost of implementation of solar and BESS is to what the current client spend, right? So the client is currently spending on diesel, with diesel genset maintenance, as a number of gensets, all of that is put into a cost per kilowatt hour. And we can easily compare the cost of solar and BESS against the current client spend, right? Where there's cost savings and we're able to establish that, then it makes sense.
Okay, okay. I think we are almost at the end of the webinar. It was scheduled for 45 minutes, but let's take another question. Okay. We have a couple of interesting ones here. Let me take this one. So again, probably, okay. It says, how can SmartHelio help with sizing of the BESS? Are you looking at solar generation, grid curtailment, etc.? Okay. Tayo, maybe I leave it to you. So with SmartHelio, like of course you can get grid curtailment identified and quantified. How is that data going to help you in sizing a best system?
So once you've identified how much curtailment you have, right, in kilowatt hour, in megawatt hour, in terms of the energy, um, that amount of energy can then be used to appropriately size the BESS, right? So we know that, and again, it could be a number of iterations depending on whether you want to stick with the existing solar or whether you're looking also for expansion of solar at the site. But the amount of energy curtailed is critical information for BESS sizing, right? At the very least, that amount of that the best capacity of that size would already help improve solar curtailment. And then whether there's a need for an expansion, you can also increase the best size.
Great, great. Okay. I think we have 1 minute over the allocated time, but maybe you can help answer this one in less than a minute. Someone is asking, Tayo, how do you manage the training of on-ground staff?
So trainings are two-pronged, right? So it's first upon commissioning, both the client staff is trained on just understanding the system, right? Because our staff, Daystar staff takes responsibility for the system. And then over the operational period of the assets on site, there's also the on the job and getting familiar with the systems on site, and that comes in over time, right? So there's a structured training approach, but also that experience that you get from dealing with the systems.
Yeah. So that thank you, Tayo, for that. Tayo, there's so many interesting questions here. Okay. I think in the interest of time, can someone tell me if this webinar was for 45 minutes or 1 hour? I think Tayo, it was 45 minutes. Yeah, yeah. I I think it was scheduled for 45 minutes. Okay. No, sorry for overshooting the time, guys, but what we will do is in the sometime next week, we have received very interesting questions. Um, a lot of it around cost. Someone is also asking, are there other reasons why someone would want a best solution, even though the energy cost goes high? I really like that question from Christopher. So what we'll do is we'll compile all the questions together. We will take Tayo's help in answering them for you. And sometime next week, you will find those answers in your mailbox. Yeah, in your email. So thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. And feel free to scan this QR code, give us your feedback, help us so that we can help improve our webinars from next time. And with after you take this survey, this will also give you an access to the recording of this webinar. All the webinar slides would be given to you, and the Q&A would be emailed to you. So please, scan this QR, and it will take few seconds for you to give us the feedback. Thank you, Tayo, for your valuable time. I know that what you do is you have crazy days, but thank you for taking out time to speak to our audience on this important topic.
Thanks a lot, Shankaransh. Happy to have been here.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day, and weekend is right around the corner, so enjoy your weekend. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.